Welcome, my name is Johnny Burtka, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Conservative. And this is the first event that we've ever done in Naples, and we hope it's the first of many more to come. And being here in Naples reminds me of the first time that I came to Naples, which was actually about 5.5 years ago. I came with my godfather, Nick Reed, and I was about half as wise as I am now because I wasn't married at the time. And I decided to plan a trip to Naples for work the week that I was getting married. I figured it would be perfect. My wife can take care of all the wedding details, and I could be staying at a lovely resort, sitting in a hot tub in the morning, and meeting with people like you in the afternoon. And it was sort of doubly problematic because my wife was from Virginia at the time. She lived near Yorktown, Virginia Beach, and I had insisted that we have our wedding in Michigan. Not only did I insist we have it in Michigan, I insisted that we have it in November so that all my friends who were home for Thanksgiving could attend the wedding. So I sent my wife, who had only met my parents twice before, up to Michigan in the middle of a snowstorm to plan the final logistics of our wedding while I was here in Naples. So 5 years later, I'm far less foolish, so I've made a resolution to always bring my wife with me when I come to Naples. So I'd like to thank Amanda, who's here with me today. I'd also like to thank a few other people who helped to make today's event possible. Our board member, George O'Neill, and his wife, Erica. Lynn Oakley, who's a member of our Nisbet Society here today. Pamela Collins and Diane Van Perries, who helped to promote the event and will be introducing our speakers. Pedro and Ann Wasmer for hosting us here at the club. And of course, Nick and Beth Reed, my godparents. So, welcome. Before we get started, I just wanted to introduce you. Many of you are probably new to the American Conservative. So I want to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. The American Conservative was founded in 2002 as a rallying cry by Pat Buchanan, Scott McConnell, and a Greek guy named TAC Theodorakopoulos, who believed that the right had lost its way, and they wanted to found a publication that could re-engage the deep questions that they had believed were ignored since the end of the Cold War. So really the impetus for founding the magazine was the war in Iraq. Pat Buchanan and his crew at the American Conservative were a group of patriotic conservatives, but they believed that the war in Iraq was a mistake. They believed in promoting an America First foreign policy that eschews the regime change and nation building projects and takes a constitutional approach to determining what our vital interests are around the world. So that was sort of the driving force for the founding of the magazine, but of course it was much more than that. We also believe that it was high time for conservatives to re-examine a set of issues that since the Cold War there had sort of settled a bipartisan consensus on that we believe deserved challenging. So at the end of the Cold War, you might remember Francis Fukuyama wrote an article called The End of History. So he was envisioning this golden age where the golden age where basically America could export their system of liberal democracy around the world. People in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, the George Washingtons on the ground would emerge, embrace our system of government and way of life. We could integrate China into the global economy. There'd be this global prosperity, free trade, open up the borders, bring in cheaper labor, and the whole world could sort of enter into this, the famous song, Imagine All the People, sort of a giant kumbaya moment. Well, about 12 years after the Cold War, we began to realize that that future, for many reasons, wasn't really working out as well as we had hoped. So our magazine began to probe the questions, not only on terms of foreign policy, but also looking at the economy. How can we have an economy that is free, but also humane, that promotes America's great working and middle classes? We were concerned about the trading away of our the world's greatest manufacturing base, to Mexico and China, who could potentially be, and is perhaps today, one of our greatest geopolitical rivals. We were concerned not only for the national security implications at stake, but also for the cultural implications. If you send away millions of jobs in the American heartland to the other side of the world, how are those people going to respond? And as we know now, many of them were hit by the opioid epidemic, which still claims 70,000 lives a year, over half of which the fentanyl actually flows in from China, affecting the same people who had lost their manufacturing jobs. And of course, on the issue of immigration, we believe that immigrants do contribute wonderfully to our culture and to our economy here in America. But we also believed that after decades of mass immigration, we need to slow things down to promote a measured immigration policy that would ultimately work better for the immigrants and better for our culture here in America. And finally, we believe that certain things are more important and more enduring than politics. As much as we love politics, we cherish faith, family, localism, our Western heritage, and also the things that we enjoy, like culture, art, great literature, poetry, good books, and good architecture. And we actually devote quite a bit of space in our magazine to covering these topics, which we believe are essential to living a good and healthy life. So when we founded the magazine, you would think that people in Washington would welcome us with open arms, but that wasn't quite the case. One of our, how should I say it, the conservative publication of note at the time, which I will not name because I have several friends who are working there today, who do great things for them, but published a story called Unpatriotic Conservatives. So they listened to the program that we laid out, an America First foreign policy, an economy that worked for the middle class, measured immigration policies, and they said, these guys are unpatriotic. They listed a number of our writers in the stories, and so for a number of years, we were just quietly on the side, persistently making these arguments, believing that there was a market for them and that the American people ultimately would come around to our way of thinking. Well, 2016 really changed quite a bit of that. Back in 2015, when Donald Trump started running, many of these people thought the issues that he was tapping into were just a bunch of crazy nonsense. They thought it was breaking with what they would consider conservative principles. However, Pat Buchanan loved to talk about conservatives of the heart because he knew that many of the people in the great American middle and the heartland actually, even if they were aligned perhaps with the Democratic Party, shared the cultural values of conservatives. And so Donald Trump, of course, tapped in to that in 2016, and I was actually here in Naples on the eve of that election. But when he won, all of a sudden, all these other organizations and publications began to say, oh, hey, maybe these things that the American conservative has been talking about for the past 15 years are actually relevant, and they do need to be addressed by Republicans. And if we don't address them, our country might end up in the hands of someone like Bernie Sanders. So I think it's important that we take a serious look at some of these issues. So we've been doing that for almost 20 years now. And how do we do it? So we do it in three principal ways. As I said, we're founded as a magazine, but we have become an institution. So in addition to the print magazine, which because you all signed up for the event today, I'll be sure to put you on our subscription list, so you'll be receiving that in the mail every other month. We also have a website, theamericanconservative.com, where we post about a dozen stories a day, including the work that our bloggers are doing. And we have our editor-in-chief, Jim Antle, here, who you'll hear from in a bit on our panel. We also do special events and conferences designed to promote the ideas that we discuss in the magazine. So we do about a dozen of those a year. Some of them include debates on college campuses, and others are in Washington, D.C. and are more policy-focused. Our annual Foreign Policy Conference gets about 300 attendees each year, and that's really geared towards informing members of Congress in our foreign policy position. We have our annual gala coming up this May, and we have Peter Thiel, who is the founder of PayPal, will be the keynote speaker, so that'll be in Washington on May the 7th, and there's details on our website if you'd like to join us for that. And finally, we do educational programs. So this year we wanted to make it a priority to invest in young leaders in Washington, D.C. So over the past year, we worked with professors at the Center for the Study of Statesmanship at Catholic University to develop a curriculum for our Constitutional Fellows Program that's designed to educate young and mid-career professionals in the principles of American constitutionalism, not only in the formal mechanisms of the Constitution, what can you do, what can't you do, but also in the culture, the history, and the tradition that really undergirds our free country and our culture from the bottom up. So we, this past Friday, had 23 very bright young people, mostly between the age of 25 and 30, many of who worked for members of Congress who you all probably know and would think of fondly, and they met for 3 hours for the very first class. So we're planning on having 6 sessions over the next 3 months, and then every spring and fall we'll graduate about 25 people from this program. And then, God willing, in 5 years we'll have 200 young people in Washington in positions of influence who understand and share our beliefs at the American Conservative and better understand the Constitution. So that's how we do it. In terms of what we can expect today, we're going to start off after you have some time to eat your entree with a panel with our editors discussing the theme, Keeping America First in 2020, which will be followed by a speech from Congressman Matt Gaetz. So what's the angle that we're going to take today? Well, in many ways, as I mentioned, Donald Trump was a wrecking ball of sorts, wrecking a lot of the orthodoxies that were held by both parties. But in the long run, Donald Trump, he might be around as president for 5 more years, or 1 more year, depending on how the election goes. But the project of re-examining these core principles and shaping American politics is one that will take a generation. And so we want to talk today not only about what's happening with the upcoming election, but what this project looks like for the next 20 years. And in many ways, Florida is really ground zero for a lot of the most exciting thought going on around these issues. You, of course, have Matt Gaetz, who we'll hear from, who's emerged as a champion of an America First vision for foreign policy. He's one of Trump's greatest allies and often reminds and encourages the president to follow through on his promises to end the forever wars in the Middle East. You have Ron DeSantis, your governor, who's leading the fight to pass E-Verify right now to make sure that employees working in the state of Florida are here legally. And you have Marco Rubio, who, while we have differences with our friend Marco on foreign policy matters, has done great work promoting American manufacturing, coming up with a plan to counter China's 2025 plan, and also talking about a common good vision for capitalism that can really strengthen the middle class, the working class, and support American families. So in many respects, the very 3 issues that our magazine was founded on are best exemplified by 3 Florida politicians who are really leading the way in those thoughts. So that is why we thought it'd be the perfect place to have our first event in Florida. Another person who's really leading the way on these issues is Tucker Carlson, who is the chairman of our advisory board at the American Conservative, and has had quite a few of us on his show on a regular basis. And like Tucker often says, the voters love this program that we put forward, the American people love it, but the Washington establishment hates it. So I think it's time that we build a movement around it and begin to work at the American Conservative, laying the foundation in terms of the ideas that are behind the policy and working to promote those. So I firmly believe that there's never been a more exciting time to be a conservative. In the past 3 years, there's been probably a half dozen new publications that have gotten started, new organizations, new conferences being held, discussing all these ideas. So I think it's exhilarating, and that the American Conservative is really on the ground floor. And we hope to be the brain trust or the ideas incubator of this new movement of what we call Main Street conservatives that will reshape American politics for a generation. So it's a new challenge. We hope to draw on timeless principles in order to do it. And I would like to welcome you all as part of our intellectual community. And I hope this is the first of many more conversations to take place in Naples. Thank you.